It was the day after Christmas in 2004. Some of you will remember seeing it on the news. A 9.1 earthquake shook the ocean floor off of the coast of Indonesia. And as the ocean floor dropped away, the water rushed in to fill that void. When that happened, the water all receded from the coasts. And there were several vacationers there who, never having seen anything like that before, walked out now on the damp sandy plain as far out into the ocean as they could to see what this strange sight was. And the water, which had crashed in and splashed back out and began to rocket toward the shore. And you know, the first wave that came in was not really very tall. It was maybe 3 feet tall, maybe 4 or 5 feet tall in places, but it wasn't like a regular 3-foot wave of the ocean, because what looked like a wave from the front actually had behind it a whole sea of water. And I remember seeing particularly some footage of one particular man who, as he was out there looking out into the horizon and seeing this wave coming back in, turned around and he began to leisurely stroll back in toward the shore. Now, I don't know if he ran, if it would have made any difference with the speed that water was traveling, but I remember the footage of him standing there, and you saw the water come in to probably just at the middle of his back, maybe just below his shoulder blades. If it had been a regular ocean wave, it wouldn't have been a big deal, but there was an entire ocean behind that, and it plowed that man under, and he was never seen alive again. It was one of the deadliest natural disasters in history. 2020 has been a tsunami. It began with the front wall of the coronavirus for many people around the world, but not for Christians. 2020 for us began with something else: persecutions of the church around the world, and our missionaries having to leave many places. And then the coronavirus came, which there's no signs of losing strength. There had been hope. Well, maybe when the warm weather comes, it'll be like the flu and it will die away. It seems to keep coming, and coming, and coming. Now we've got violent protests, unlike anything that we have seen, that certainly I've seen, since I think the last time I saw anything like that in the cities was in 1969, when I was a tyke, on the news after the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. We've got statues being torn down by angry mobs, not just Confederate generals, but founding fathers. And inexplicably, if you've been following the news, the statue of the escaped slave and brilliant orator and firebrand abolitionist Frederick Douglass. And we've got the wave now of cancel culture. If ever you've done anything, said anything, thought anything that is now deemed to be politically incorrect, you're in danger of being canceled. Comedians are boycotted because of jokes they told 40 years ago. And on July 2nd, Neil Golightly, who was the senior vice president of communications for Boeing Company, was forced to resign from his position because, as a young combat pilot in 1987, he wrote an op-ed piece in which he voiced opposition to women in the military serving in combat roles. And trying to speak reason to any of these situations is like trying to take a sheet of cardboard and hold it up to deflect the tsunami. But the waves that we encounter will give us occasion to worship if we keep our eyes on Jesus. I want to read to you today from an account in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 14, verses 22 through 33. Immediately Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowd. After he dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. And when evening came, he was there alone. But the boat was already a considerable distance from the land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. During the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went out to them walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid." "Lord, if it's you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." "Come," he said. And Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid and began to sink. He cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You of little faith," he said, "why did you doubt?" And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." Father, fill our hearts with your Spirit today. Fill our perspective with your word today, that we might worship and say of Jesus, "Truly, you are the Son of God." Amen. If you'd asked the disciples, they would have told you that they would really have preferred not to be there. Text doesn't tell us that. Common sense does. I don't know if you've ever been in a big body of water on a little boat when winds come up. It's not fun. Years ago, my brother had a sailboat. I thought it was a big sailboat. It was a 40-foot sailboat. He took me out sailing on the Hudson River, and we were sailing near around the Tappan Zee Bridge. And the river's quite wide there, but there's shelves. That's why it's built there. There's shelves. But then there's a big span up over where there's a shipping lane. The water is very deep there, and we were out in the deep water of the shipping lane, and all of a sudden this squall came up. The sky turned dark instantly. The wind got really cold. I did not think it was possible for there to be waves that big on a river. And I don't think there are many times in my life when I've ever been as fearful as I was then. And we're told in our text here that when evening had come, that would have been just after sunset, that their boat was already being buffeted by the waves. And you look at the time, the watch in the night when Jesus comes, it indicates that for at least 8 hours they were fighting to keep the boat upright. And you know, they were there only together. A lot of those men didn't even know each other before they started following Jesus. They were only there because they were serving Jesus. Where was he? He wasn't there. And yet we discover from our text that Jesus was the one who'd sent them into this storm. Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side. And he'd gone up on a mountain to pray, and when evening came, he was there alone. But the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. That doesn't say, Jesus told them get in the boat and go out into the storm. But he must have known what was coming. And as I said, I'm sure that these people didn't want to be there. They were there because they'd listened to Jesus. And I wonder if they were thinking, what have we gotten ourselves into here? And shouldn't Jesus have been with them? Wasn't he supposed to protect them? But there they are, left alone. 2020 feels like that sometimes, doesn't it? It does to me. Lord, I'm doing what you told me to do, trying to do it. Why am I in this mess of a storm? And where are you? Do you ever feel like that? Lord, where are you? The psalmist felt like that. Wrote things like, how long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I wrestle with my thoughts and day after day have sorrow in my heart? How long will my enemy triumph over me? And have you ever stopped to consider that all of the things that we are in, the roiling storm around us, the thing that makes us feel like we can't find any footing, like everything's crumbling around us and under us, have you ever stopped to consider that Jesus sent us into the storm? Now, why do I say that? Well, I say it because I read things like Proverbs 16:2. The Lord has prepared everything for his purpose. Proverbs 16:33. Many plans are in a person's heart, but the Lord's decree will prevail. And Ephesians 1:11. He works all things after the counsel of his will. And please don't misunderstand me. You don't have to like the storm. The disciples didn't like the storm. But you will unnecessarily magnify your fears in it and of it if you think that Jesus had nothing to do with your being here. If you think Jesus had nothing to do with the circumstances that we find ourselves in, virologically, sociologically, politically, or spiritually. God sent the storm, and he sent us into it. Can you bring yourself to believe that? Because if it's true that Jesus sent us into the storm, then we need to be looking for Jesus to show up. During the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went out to them walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. It's a ghost, they said, and cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, take courage, it is I, don't be afraid. Sometimes we become so focused on the danger, on the difficulty, on the hardship, on the thing that threatens us, That we don't even recognize the Lord when he shows up, when he makes himself known. And the Lord doesn't show up always the way that we expect him to. That was true here. There was nothing in the experience that the disciples had had with Jesus that would make him think that they would see him come walking across the lake. They'd seen him do a number of wonderful things, but this is the only time that is recorded that he's done this. There's no time before this, and there was no time since this. And because they're not expecting him to show up, they miss that it's him. They think that it's the word that Matthew uses in Greek is a phantasma, a ghost, a phantom, an apparition. And I think that oftentimes we miss Jesus in our difficult situations because we're not looking for him. We don't expect him to show up. Are you looking for him? In the midst of everything that's going on here, in the midst of all of the hardship and difficulty and uncertainty and feeling like we can't get our footing and that everything's just crumbling around us, are you looking for Jesus to show up? And are you expecting that he might show himself in unexpected ways? Yesterday, I cannot tell you why I did this because it's not the way I usually operate. Yesterday, I woke up and I said, I'm not going to preach the sermon that I worked on all week. I'm going to preach the one that I'm preaching today. And it was because something was in my mind, and what was in my mind was these words of Jesus, take courage, it is I, don't be afraid. Now, any of you who know me know that I am not a spooky guy. I am a logical guy. I lay out plans and I follow those plans. I don't follow impulses. Much to the chagrin of my wife sometimes when she wants to do something spur of the moment. No, dear, we haven't planned that, you know. And so it was really odd that that's how I spent my Saturday. I mean, I thought even as I was doing it that it was odd. And while I'm working on this, I get a call from Elder Michael Blackburn. Now, you know, I send out when I'm the people who participate in the service all participate in what goes into the service. They provide the calls to worship. They provide the responsive readings. They provide the music based on the information that I send them. Michael Blackburn calls me yesterday while I'm in the midst of this, and he says, I'm thinking through and I'm going to pray in the pastoral prayer, and I've got this strong inclination that I need to pray for people not to be afraid. Wow, where did that come from? You know, I drew the only logical conclusion that I could draw. It's a ghost. That's the conclusion that they draw. It's a ghost. Because they're not looking for Jesus to show up. And what this passage tells us is that the waves that we encounter will give us occasion to worship if we keep our eyes on Jesus. If we keep our eyes on Jesus. Lord, if it's you, Peter replied, tell me to come to you on the water. Come, he said. Then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, Lord, save me. And immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. You have little faith, he said, why did you doubt? And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, truly, you are the Son of God. It's a remarkable account. It's remarkable enough that Jesus is walking on the water. But as we read the Gospels and we come to understand who Jesus is, maybe not so strange, There have been theologians, Bible expositors who have said, that's interesting. Here comes Jesus walking on the water, and the Bible opens with the words, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth was formless and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was over the waters. And here comes Jesus walking on the waters. And it's remarkable that Jesus is doing that, but it's astounding that Peter does. But Peter's only able to walk over the waves of the storm at the bidding of Jesus as long as he's looking at Jesus. And so we're told that he steps out. That's what we're told. Jesus is coming. Peter got down out of the boat and walked on the water and came toward Jesus. Jesus was his goal and therefore his focus, and as long as he's looking at Jesus, the water, the wind, it says that he saw the wind. I don't know how you see the wind, so I think he saw the effects of the wind. Right? That when he looked at the wind, when he saw the effects of it, when his focus was there, he became afraid, and that's when he started sinking. Now Jesus still cares about Peter, and he saves him, but he chides him for his lack of faith. And it's important, as this whole thing winds up, to see the outcome of this whole event. We're told the wind died down. Amid everything that we're facing, it just feels like wave after wave after wave after wave after wave after wave, and it's never going to end. But you know what, friends? It will. And I try from time to time to kind of take a 30,000-foot view and think 5 years from now, 10 years from now, whatever else we may be facing, I don't know, maybe a giant asteroid will be hitting the earth then, I don't know. But whatever we're facing then, we won't be facing this. And history just goes like that. God, in his kind providence, things shake themselves almost to utter annihilation and destruction, and then somehow they calm down. They even out. No storm, no matter how intense, be it virological, sociological, political, or spiritual, lasts forever. 2020 has been a tsunami with wave after wave. And people are starting to go under. Some Christian people are starting to go under. I want to tell you, you can count on going under if you take your eyes off of Jesus and you put them on the storm. Count on it. You can count on going under if you are glued to your phone, if you're glued to cable television, if you're glued to the internet and you're spending scant time in this book. Because it's here that you'll find a God who is the rock, a solid footing, a place you can stand in the storm. You can't ignore Jesus and keep your attention focused and fixated on the things that bring you anxiety and fear and not think that you're going to go under. You will go under. But listen, we are not here in 2020 by accident. You can count on it. You don't have to like 2020. I don't like it much myself. Jesus sent us into the storm. You don't have to pretend to like the storm, but you need to trust him. And as you pray, how long, Lord, will you hide your face forever? It's legitimate to pray that. The psalmist prayed it. You need to be looking for Jesus to show up. He may show up in unexpected ways. But don't be blind to his presence and his interventions because you've got your eyes focused on the storm. Keep your eyes focused on Jesus. The waves that we encounter will give us occasion to worship if our eyes are on Jesus. You pray with me. Our Father, in the midst of all of the uncertainty, and I just talked to a man yesterday who's lost his job and was concerned about that. And Father, as we have people now in our own congregation who have contracted the virus, one for certain who's been so diagnosed. And Lord, as you can hardly turn on the news without seeing fires and statues coming down and retribution against people for things that they've said. And it's just wave after wave. And we're worn down. Lord, look with mercy upon your people who are tired and are fearful of going under because of the weight of it, because of the strain of it all. But Lord, help your people, I pray, help your people to take their eyes off the storm, put them on Jesus. To believe in their heart of hearts that this is not a surprise for him, the storm he sent us into. Give us keen eyes to look for his showing up in ways that we don't expect. And Lord, cause the waves that we encounter give us occasion to worship as we keep our eyes on Jesus. Amen.